My first workshop was actually an underground vault. You know, the old coal vaults underneath the streets of central London. I don't have any photographs of that though, but these are reference pics to give you an idea of what it looked like. I had to bend down to get in there, put it that way. These photos are also stretched to fit the aspect ratio. This is my second workshop out of 4, also in the basement under a building in central London. You couldn't swing a cat. You see that red piece of material? That's a dust flap, because I couldn't really cut on that saw without removing some of the brickwork. These photos are actually quite deceiving. They were taken with a fisheye lens. I'm quite broad for them. I'm about 600mm my shoulders, so I was pretty much turning on the spot most of the time in there. Where you saw those clamps outside, that's where I put my first proper table saw, well, sight saw. What I've pretty much done there is just put up some battens, 2x4s and all sorts, just to string up the plastic polythene, just keep the rain off of it. And I pretty much left the tools there. The only reason I'm showing this is because there's a lot of people that want to moan about YouTubers having big workshops and expensive tools, but you've got to understand each YouTuber started from nothing and slowly worked their way through up to get better tools. Some YouTubers won't want to spend their money on tools and will spend it on their family. I don't have a family. I don't have any kids that I know of. So my children are my tools. I also did all of the cheap tools, and God boy, that they were painful. But what I quickly realised is I bought these cheap tools. They've cost me 50 quid, let's say, whatever. The much better version is probably 4 times the amount of money, but I've already wasted £50 on buying that cheap tool in the first place. Simply put, you're better off just sucking on it and buying a much better tool in the first place and saving yourself the money. That is if this is something you're serious about. If you're just a hobbyist, you're going to have to put up with it and learn how to accommodate the fact that tool is setting square constantly. I'm looking a lot more masculine though these days. I look at my workshop and I've always planned every workshop simply like it's less like being in the kitchen. If you're watching Leffy, I'm up for some reviews, okay? So hit me up.
Yeah, boy!
There's my lovely 3-horse beauty, centre of the workshop. I didn't bother cleaning. I just left the workshop as is for this. Keep it real, really. Dropping a small screw on that lot is worse than dropping the soap in the shower. This bobbin sander wasn't cheap, I can assure you. And this is what keeps happening to the bobbins. Bit of heat and you put a belly in it and you have to buy a new one. That's a real pain because they're not cheap either. Straight on with the bandsaw. It's a good bandsaw that. I have maxed it out on oak beam, resawing it. And albeit a bit slow, it got through it, did the job. The cut width isn't wonderful, but to be honest with you, you know, you've got all the space to your right anyway. Cut height, seldom need to cut anything more than that. Fence is okay. It does need, time you use it, it needs to be checked. Heating, that's all I've got. I don't use it. It's as useless as tits on a ball. It only heats right in front of you, so you've got to stand underneath it, and then it just cooks you. It's like being a battery chicken. My outfeed table, what can I say, really? Plenty of storage. I keep clamps, cables, jigs, fixings and stuff, and also some more jigs. And sometimes when you open it up, you find some goodies that you thought you'd lost, even a pencil or two sometimes. I generally use this end of the workshop for my track saw with what I can only describe as a day-day blade. When using the saw like that, in that situation, it needs clamping down and it makes one hell of a mess. So I can easily connect that saw to that grey pipe you can see there, which goes to the extractors the other side of that wall. Otherwise, I'd be filling up a shop vac bag rapidly. This is the head I was talking about. I have done a video about this. I put a thingy up in the top corner there for you to click on if you want to know more about that. Cutting width max 25mm, minimum 6mm, I think it is. Very handy tool that. And one of my favourite films. I did actually do a film with Heath Ledger. I think it was called Candy, if I remember rightly. That's a wicked film. That's a real poster stolen from a cinema back then when the film was coming out. Wood storage, I'll be completely honest with you, that pile never gets smaller and it's irritating because come a year's time it's like a decaying haystack, mate. I mean, it's everywhere. and often it just gets burnt because you can only go so far before you're falling over it. And then you've got my sheet good storage, which is just like an A-frame shaped thing that keeps the boards on a slight lean. There's a bit more storage there, which I keep bits I'm working on out of the way so I can still use the compound saw. I thought I'd include this, my spray gun storage, because I think it's quite clever actually. It's pretty much just a bit of MDF with some hose clamps, and then with the hose clamps have some heat shrink tubing slid over and heated and shrunk, which protects the guns from getting any scratches on them. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through every box like this. This video's long enough. Over this side, stuff I don't use a great deal of. My sliding compound miter saw. Now, I've had this saw for, I think, about 10 years. It's pretty beat up now, and it's a very good saw. But a lot of people complain about the handle, which I don't get. As you can see from what I'm doing here, it's positioned in such a way it's like you're hand sawing, which is much more beneficial when you're doing miter cuts. The other nice thing about it is that mechanism, how that tilts it. Also, those bars don't go out the back of the saw, so you can put the saw back up against the wall. Dust collection is very good on it, unless you do that, and then it's a waste of time. C'est la vie. This has its own dust extraction, which I can also plug another hose into and use around the workbench if needed. Drawers just stuffed full of junk. I should really go through those one day. My toolbox, I mean, goes without saying really. I love this toolbox. I'm really glad I spent the time on it, matching the grain up and everything like that. And I can take the drawers out for everything I need to do with dovetails to the bench instead of having to pick out all the tools. It goes back nice and tidy. If you want to see more about that build, again, I'll put one of those tabby things up in the corner. Loads of storage space in that. There's 4 doors. That's hanging 450mm off that wall. Good job it's a brick wall, eh? The area below either looks like this or like this. It's a bit of a pain. You want to use the miter saw and you've got to get all of that stuff out of the way. That's why I added that extra shelf underneath the toolbox to hopefully get stuff off the deck. It works and it doesn't work. This area here is probably where I spend 95% of my time, so everything is to hand. Tools behind me, workbench in front of me, get on with it, everything's there. I have extra clamping options here. I don't need a leg vise like so many people across the pond do. This suits me perfectly fine. Seldom use it, I think probably maybe once a year actually. I seldom have to plane the edge of a long board because obviously I've got the planer thicknesser over the other side. The price for that hardware as well was just way too high for my liking, considering what I got for my mini workbench from Poland. And, you know, to be quite frank with you, what a leg vise does, a carpenter vise can do adequately well, and it's, you know, it's a fraction of the cost. And it's done me well for years. Clamps, I love all of those clamps except for those Bessie parallel clamps. They're such a pain. You get any glue on the rails of them, you can't rely on them if you're in a hurry. So I'd sooner much rather have the pipe clamps, to be honest with you. I also like pipe clamps because you can have 8 heads like you see there and lots of different tube lengths hidden away as well, so you don't take up so much room. This shows you what I mean. I mean, that's a fair old lump of glue on there. If that was on the parallel clamp, there's no way that clamp would shut. And in a pinch, and I'm in a rush, glue's going off, I don't have the time to fuck about and clean it. Using wax paper or the likes, you're not living in the real world. Who's got time for that shit? I haven't got time to babysit clamps. They need to do their job, they need to do them quickly, and with minimal fuss. I have the vac hanging off the wall because it's much better for that hose to come down and to the workbench than coming from the floor up, over and down to the workbench. And I just put it into a bungee there, and that takes the weight out of that pretty much. I pretty much leave this sander left out with 220 grit. I seldom have to use any other grit these days. I've had this set up for like 5 or 6 years, so I don't think it's damaging the vac. I think those clips, the belt hooks that come with the DeWalt drills, I think there are 2 of those I've used there. The problem with the vac on the floor is it drastically shortens that hose, and it's in the way. It's in the way of your feet. It's a terrible idea. Boom arm doesn't really make any difference. As you can see, I have 4 vacs, and they're pretty much dedicated to what they do. One's for the router, one's for the chop saw, the other one's for sanding and whatever I do at the workbench. Then I have these 2 that do all the grunt work, you know, the machines that make all the big chips. Dust extraction. I The planer thicknesser has its own dedicated HVLP extractor. Because, I mean, even though I think the bag's something like 100 litres or something ridiculous, you have to empty it a hell of a lot. I took the no bolt return switches off of each extractor and just simply extended the wires through that wall all the way to the tool. Another good reason not to have those in your workshop, because if the bag comes loose from the strap, that's what happens and it goes everywhere. Like it or not, guys and girls, size does matter. Length and girth make a difference to what application you're using it for. I'm using the same vac to demonstrate this. One hose longer than the other, both the same diameter hose though. EU regs came into effect a while ago, which drastically changed what suction power our vacs are allowed to use. Generally, most vacs prior to that rule coming into effect are underpowered for our needs in the workshop, that is, and I think at home too. So I'll try and make this pretty straightforward. You've got your normal sort of vacuum size hose. You do not need your vac attached to your sander on full suction, about half or 1/3 of power. Otherwise you're creating more problems for yourself. It's sucking the sander down, causing you pigtails all over your work. Now, you don't want to be using LV HB hoses to be doing an HVLP job, because that is what happens. High volume, low pressure literally means that you can move a lot of shit at once, which LV, low volume, high pressure, can't do. It's your fine dust, it's your sanders, that type of work. HVLP hoses are quite obvious really. They start from about 75mm, 100mm, 150mm and upwards. Depends on your extractor. So what you need to consider in your dust extraction is do not use 90-degree corners. You lose airflow. Use 45 degrees in your piping. You do not need to worry about grounding it. That's absolute horse shit. Keep the hose that comes with the extractor that same diameter to as close to the machine as you possibly can, and then make the hose smaller to fit the machine. I use this cover. I think you use it for covering speaker cables and stuff, and then I heat shrink wrap it to hide away the cables, which is really handy because it stops the hose from catching on the edge of tables or track saw rails. I have two track saws. One will cut 80mm on the smaller, lighter one. On the track will cut 50mm. Why I have two, you ask probably, with the 80mm can cut what the small one can. The small one's much lighter, and you use it a lot more for for sheet goods. So I'd rather have a lighter saw than use that big heavy sod. And also that big sod takes a dado blade, so it needs the power. I have tried the French cleat idea of storing stuff. One, I can't bear the cleaning the tools that are attached to those French cleats. Also those French cleats, the bit that's connected to the wall, that's just like a big cup of dust after a week of working. So if you want to move around your tools onto another cleat, you're going to have to vacuum out that cleat. For me, the best storage is drawers. Drawers. Cupboards, you put stuff in, that's where stuff goes to die. Put it at the back, you can't find it, you go and buy more, and then have a spring clean next year and go, oh geez, I've got a whole can of it here and it's gone off now too. And I've used full extension drawer slides. Most of them are 600mm deep, so you can get a lot in there. Sustainers, these grey boxes. Now, I think these are a fantastic idea. You put your tools away, or it's organised, you can see what's in that box without having to open it. Lots of different brands make these sustainers, and I think they're brilliant. Especially if you need to go somewhere as well. You can pick a box out, get another box out, stick it on the top, connect it to, and it's then one box as well. Fantastic idea. And this is similar to what your tools are like on a French cleat system. Bugs really annoys me, and to clean it I've got to take all of those tools off and clean every individual tool. I should just remember to shut the door. I know I never do. Lighting above the bench, very important. I wish I had another 4 of these, and they would be much better if they were lined up so they were just hanging over the edge of the bench, so that all shadows would be cancelled out when you're trying to mark out on the bench. Otherwise these are quite nice and bright, very nice and white, which is favourable, especially when filming. Without them on, it's really quite dark and it's very difficult to see what you're marking out. As you can see from here, I used to have some photography lights hanging from that ceiling, but they were so low you could easily bump them with a bit of wood and you just get covered in the sawdust that's been sitting on them for however long. It did the job though, but I do recommend getting the panels, especially if you've got low ceilings. And this is what I mean by not having enough of them. It throws a shadow. I mean, that's quite a thick square, so it's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get what I mean. That can be a problem when you're trying to mark out dovetails. My workbench, I made a video about how I made this, but as you can see, it's part oak and part pine. Well, 2x4s, all of that's so I could have a good solid hardwood end of the bench to beat on, chisel on that sort of stuff. And this is how well it's held up. I mean, fair enough, it has had some pretty hefty whacks there, probably when I lost my temper about something. And those bench dogs, I don't know if I probably say it every video, but they are the dog's bollocks. But they really are so handy. They go away. And you know, other bench dogs you'll lose. Think, where the hell are they? And I need them right now. I can't wait. Those, I mean, just click, they're gone. Click, they're there. Must remember though, if you're going to make them, that the bench dog itself needs to have a very slight angle on it. Otherwise the wood will slip when you're clamping it all, I mean. Sharpening, I try to keep this an absolute minimal. I mean, that's my setup really. Some diamond stones, I seldom have to use much of this. I've got a Shapton stone there which I really like, and that diamond stone there is my flattening plate really that I use on these two stones. One is the Shapton glass plate, that one, and I'll flatten it off with that. And 99% of my time I'll just run chisel over the, I think it's 8,000 grit, I can't remember now, to put a secondary bevel on it, and that stays like that for quite a while. I've chosen the Shapton as my favourite stone because I don't have to soak it for 30 minutes or whatever it is. I do use the Veritas Mark II honing guide. I've got a couple of attachments for it, one for planing knives and one for chisels. However, me being a perfectionist, it's not without its faults, let's put it that way. Your angle is dictated by the length of the iron or the chisel that's in that jig. So if you're putting a new edge on it, you need to bear that in mind. If you're taking a few mil off, that's going to change your angle. If I have to put a new edge on a blade, I'll try and make it quick and painless because I really fucking hate sharpening. I'll basically get an old belt sounding belt, double side that down to the flat surface, which is my planer, and then I've got a nice long run and it makes very quick work of it. Home insulation board, 50 mil, and it will support an 8x4 sheet good. It does last a long time. Try and remember just to cut on one side of it, otherwise it starts to split. Like I've had to tape it up there. Two different sizes. The thing is, it's nice and light. You can lift it off the floor easily, put it on the table, put it away. I've tried all sorts, but you know, 2x4s under it to support the sheet goods. Sometimes the sheet goods will pinch when you finish the cut. That's by far the best idea. And here's my miniature version, which is an absolute godsend, especially when you're doing fine work that you need to have your head closer to, like chisel work and stuff. And that just lives under the lip of that workbench. The reason that there is that lip is so I can get a chair underneath it and use it as a desk if need be. This is my router table. Now, you can't buy this anymore, which is a shame because it is brilliant. I've made many router tables from sheet goods, wood and all sorts, and they were just such a prick during the seasons. They'd just warp and twist. It just didn't matter what you used, that it will still move. Ply, MDF, every season it will change, and that's a problem. Planer thickness, and I've got a love-hate relationship with this, but I'll tell you one thing, if I had my time again, it'd be the first tool I buy before any other tool in that workshop. The problem I have with this planer is that's nice and square, that fence now, right? So I want to move that forward and cover up a bit more of that blade, for whatever reason, and lock it down. Look, I've now got to set that fence again. Really pisses me off. See, I just get the feeler gauge for you there. The other thing, this Stone Age way of doing things, and nut and bolt and the locking. I mean, if you've ever tried to level the planer top off and it's got this kind of fixing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That can take you can get lucky and get it done in an hour, or you can get really unlucky and it takes days. Terrible. And when you lock that table down, it also raises the other end of the table. It's a real pain, but I have to say, that cut's really nice with difficult grain. I have a lot less tear out with that cutter head than I do with a block with just two knives in it. I would also really have preferred a planer that's got longer beds. They're too short. I mean, they're about 600 mil. So I have made this up to support long parts, and that works beautifully and it supports the wood well. But if I have a problem, I'm not going to be able to run out, am I? We have to hurdle that. Both the table saw and the planer thicknesser need a 16 amp supply. I can't turn both of those machines on at the same time. I can't use both of them at the same time, so it's all good. Otherwise, that 3 horsepower table saw will trip fuse. That pillar drill, that's for anything that shits on my car. As pillar drills go, I'd rather have one that was on the floor, because occasionally you do need that extra length so you can drill. That light doesn't live there anymore, because if I need to turn the table or left or right, it'll rip the light off anyway. That reminds me, I must change the sheets. I have been down that road where I made tables for pillar drill, you know, with tracks and stops and all this fancy schmancy stuff, it just becomes a pain, especially those tracks that just fills up with chips, wood chips, you know. I found this is just all I need. I need the length for drilling into long bits, for instance, so that's the only reason it's that long, and I can't get out the door with that on the table, so I've got a small one as well. There's a little insert also made from chipboard for when it gets drilled to shreds, basically, and they're easy to replace. They're all the same size. That's the same deal on the smaller one. My air supply, well, that's that big because if I need to spray anything, I need that much air, pretty simply. Otherwise, it's overkill for a workshop. Air sanders, that's still going to drain that very quickly. And last but not least, really, this is drawers by the door, which I keep all my 4K paint stuff in, mainly for the car. Ear protection. Now, I love these headphones. They don't mar my head. They don't leave marks. They're really comfortable. I wear these from the moment I get to the workshop to the moment I leave the workshop. I think I get 2.5 days out of a pair. Take one off, put another pair on. I didn't use ear defenders of any kind for ages. I bought these, used them constantly. And now when I turn that chop saw on, boy, I'm like, oh my fucking God, that's too loud. My hearing repaired. More odds and sods, blades that need to go and be sharpened, but I never get around to doing. I just buy another new one. And a fire extinguisher, I leave that by the door because generally if you're going to come in for a fire, you don't want to run through a fire, do you, to get to a fire extinguisher to put the fire out. So I feel that's the best place for it.